It's a dark academia, romantasy, friends to lovers story. Yes, I'm talking about RF Kuang's latest book, Katabasis, and trying to get this out and add to the discourse because I just finished it earlier this week, and I know it's all the talk of the internet right now as the hot new release by the hot new author. So hello, welcome to the channel. My name is Zach, and this channel is mostly science fiction and fantasy reviews with a little of everything else from comics to manga to business and personal development. But yes, it's mostly science fiction and fantasy. And with that said, yes, I have read RF Kuang before. So to set the stage for this review, I started in DNF Babel. It was interesting. I liked the magic system, but something about the characters and maybe the heavy-handedness of the message about colonialism didn't work for me. I wasn't maybe in the right mindset. So I DNF'd it, returned my loan to the library. But I did try Yellowface because, again, as a literary darling, it got so many great reviews, and it was a departure from her previous works because it's not fantasy. It's more just a fictional story and a criticism of the literary industry. And yeah, it turned out I actually really enjoyed the Yellowface. I thought it was a fun story. It was a break from my normal maybe science fiction and fantasy read. So a great read, enjoyed the characters. It was witty, sarcastic, kind of nuanced the characters. Yeah, I thought it was fun. I again, heavy-handed maybe as well with, yes, the publishing industry needs work. It definitely had a message, kind of like how Babel had a message that it was trying to tell, and maybe a little over the top, but that kind of formula over the top worked because that was the story of Yellowface. It was a criticism of an industry. And then that brings us to her newest book, again, all over the internet with advanced reader copies. No, I just read this from my library, so I'm coming out a little bit late with the review because I had to wait for the library hold to come through. But Katabasis has a lot of buzz, and for good and bad. And now that I've read it and finished it, I think it has the same problem that I had with Babel as far as the character work, where it's a really interesting premise. I love the magic system. Babel's magic system was cool. I think that's really cool using linguistics as a magic system. It's a really fun concept. And then the rest of the story, you have characters like any kind of epic fantasy novel is going to have POVs and stories and subplots. And that is a return to form here in Katabasis. So if you don't know already, which I'm sure you know already, the plot is two academics that are in there doing their research at Cambridge are forced, or choose, I should say, to go to hell to follow their advisor who has passed away. We learn about that in the story, and they must return his body back to the world of the living for what the premise sets out as to get recommendations for job recommendations later in the academic world. So it's a story about academia as a whole, but it's also a journey through the levels of hell by our two main characters, Alice Law and the second character, Peter. So okay, I'll talk about Peter. Peter was not my favorite. Alice was okay for who she was. But it has the magic system. So the other thing that this world has that really drew me in, and where I'll make the parallel to Babel, is the magic system in this novel works in the sense that chalk, the magicians, the mages, the magic in this world is drawn by using circles, using chalk. And it was, even though I just read it, it's the life of the animals and the organic matter that's been condensed into the chalk gives it power. So if you read Witch Hat Atelier, the manga and forthcoming anime, it works similar to that, where in Witch Hat Atelier, it's magic ink that powers the magic, but I got that kind of vibes in that parallel to the chalk, that there's special chalk that powers the magic circles and the spells that these mages, wizards, have to use in Katabasis. So with that said, the chalk is the magic system. And then most cool, which I thought, again, this is very cool, Kuang has great ideas, is that magic survives on the premise of paradoxes. So it's basically the mage's will and suspension of disbelief and their So a paradox is, if one hand's lying and the other hand is telling the truth, which one is telling the truth? Those kind of like mind-bending mind games that academics play. To have a paradox, it's by setting the spell within the paradox, it bends the rules of reality, and that wills through the belief and how strong the paradox is. It wills that magic into being. So it's a really interesting premise. I like the premise and the world. So to start with the pros, what I enjoyed about Katabasis is the magic system with the magic chalk and these paradox-based spells to kind of bend reality and warp reality to the caster's will. Very cool, very well done. The pacing also, as a whole, so the book starts off right in the action. The professor has just died, and Alice is heading down to hell from like chapter 1, page 1. It puts us right in the action. There's no backstory, but we of course are told the backstory of our characters through flashbacks later on in the novel. We learn about who they are, how they came together, what their relationship to each other is in school, and as they travel through the levels of hell. So very interesting magic system. And then the world. So as we go in hell, this is something that I have not personally come across in another work of fiction, another fantasy series about traveling through hell. So it's interesting in the sense also that the hell adapts to the not user, but the not victim, but just the person that goes into the world. So Alice and Peter's version of hell is a mirror of their world, which is in academia. So hell is the university system, is dissertations, it's advisors, it's other students, and that's all Alice and Peter encounter on their travels. So it fits the world and the characters because it's very much a critique of academia. So as Babel was the critique of colonialism, and our Yellowface was a critique of the publishing industry, here Katabasis is a critique. Clearly, you make this very evident. It's a critique of academia, of higher education, of the system, of the world, the professor and advisor relationship that students have, the power they have over students, the inherent classism and sexism and misogyny in the system, where you have these kind of creepy old men preying on the younger female students in first years, and this hierarchy of power in institutions like academia, and especially, of course, classical education. So the equivalent would be the Oxfords and Cambridge in the UK and the Ivies in the US. Of course, here is Kuang writing from what she knows. She's currently in her PhD, and she has studied at these institutions. She studies at Ivy League. So of course she knows this and is writing from what she knows. And I assume either through stories or she has very similar parallel experiences to what Alice is experiencing in the novel. So that said, the writing itself was interesting. I do enjoy Kuang's writing. I think because, again, Yellowface worked. Here, Alice is this pretentious academic. It's all she knows. That's all she's singularly focused on. And this is where I'll transition to some of my negatives. It's almost too much because Kuang's making this point that academia is bad, and Alice, again, in my mind, was kind of a proxy for Kuang, for Rebecca herself as a student going through this, that some of the motivations and the character work itself was a little bad. So this is where it definitely didn't hit for me, and maybe similar reasons why I abandoned Babel. The characters just didn't draw me in, even though, yes, I pushed through and finished Katabasis this time. But we learned that, yes, she travels to hell for reasons of just getting her advisor. Basically, what is given in the story, semi-spoilers, is that she wants to go out in a blaze of glory because the cost to go to hell is half your remaining lifespan. So Alice, as a young grad student, would rather go to hell, get that academic recommendation to have a prestigious job post-graduation, post-dissertation of her PhD, and only produce works for the next maybe 15, 20 years as opposed to her entire lifespan. So she's willing to sacrifice it all to go out because that's all she knows in her worldview. She is singularly focused on being the best, of proving everyone wrong. And we learn that through the other work. Her character is so stubborn to prove the system wrong and burn it all down because she's the best. So the character work of Alice was so, and Peter was not my favorite. He is set up to be kind of the rival to Alice, but they do tend to go together. And again, early in the novel, I was like, why are they together? Why is she letting him come with her to hell? Because she's singularly focused that she's going to get her advisor back and bring him back so she can get job recommendations. But now she's letting this Peter guy tag along, who we find out that, she hates. And then through the backstories, we uncover the misunderstandings that was happening between the two and how we see both sides and how they kind of had different ideas, I guess you'd say, of each other, that they each had this impression of their mind of the other person, where this rivalry was just in their heads, and that's who they are as people. And you saw this coming a mile away, that they're going to turn from friends to lovers. And by the end of the novel, sure enough, they turned into friends to lovers, even though Peter says nasty things about Alice throughout the novel. They were like, I don't know why they ended up together at the end, but this Friends to Lovers it's spoilery, but it's once you start reading it's not a surprise. You can tell clear as day that this is how the novel is going to turn out, with the hints they're dropping, and as they reveal this backstory of cross communications together. So the character work had me groaning, but yes, I was going to finish it because, again, the story was okay, and I liked the world, seeing hell, the different levels, and the different kind of trials that they go through. So the romance trope, and you'll see the later Peter dilemma that happens, was a mile away. You know how it's going to come out. But then my other really qualm with this was kind of the two MacGuffin devices that seemingly came out of nowhere. So this is a little bit spoiler territory, but Alice is shown to have something done to her by her advisor, and she writes it off as him doing research on her, and she of course rationalizes it in her mind, but the way it's done, I don't think it was really foreshadowed before, and all of a sudden she has this, and then we deal with this issue throughout the novel. And again, semi-spoiler, I think A Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett, which I just read and loved. I've read both books, The Drop of Corruption as well, and they deal with this literary device of infallible memory way better, and the consequences of it. And we get a little bit of the consequences here in Katabasis, but maybe it's just because the Shadow of the Leviathan series of A Drop of Corruption and The Tainted Cup are just so fresh in my mind, and it was so well done with Din, that here I see it again in a lesser way with Alice and Katabasis. But again, it was interesting, and it was kind of like a MacGuffin though. So just it came out of nowhere. And then later towards the end, and this felt like, does Kuang need a better editor? But in order to kind of wrap the story up, the characters find this flower just randomly growing in by a river, and it's a paradox flower. So it has unimaginable power because the world, the magic system runs on paradoxes. So how this flower could be kind of like alive and dead at the same time, it allows them to potentially recreate the world and the universe in their image because it's such a strong paradox. Then they use this flower as a bargaining chip with the King of Hell, with King Yama, Lord Yama, and it just came out of nowhere. And of course it wraps everything up, and finding this magic MacGuffin flower allows them to escape hell. So it just felt very like low stakes. It came out of nowhere. Like, what is this flower at the end? So yes, it's a spoiler, but it was so poorly done that maybe you won't see it coming because it's just so out of left field. And just in general, I guess, the pacing was a little slow in the middle until it felt like, that she was trying to just wrap this up by introducing the MacGuffin device. And the other last criticism I had was the looming threat of these cryptors, who are other souls that are trapped in hell, but they're also kind of like magic users. And they're introduced early on, but then they don't make an appearance. Again, that's why I'm bringing this up about the magic flower. They come back at the very end. So all of a sudden at the end, we kind of have like an action sequence just to kind of give it some action finally for the whole book. And the cryptors make their reappearance, and we have like a mini magic fight, and the stakes are kind of high. There's a little bit of action at the very, very end. But yeah, there wasn't as much like looming threat. Like we didn't see them at other previous levels here and there, that Alice and Peter had other challenges through the different levels, but they didn't have this like pursuing force, even though it was kind of mentioned early on. So again, that's what the pros and cons. The cons kind of negative weighed it down for me as just didn't work for me. So if I had to give it like a numerical rating, it would definitely be 3.5, but I rounded up to a 4 on my Goodreads because I know there are people that do love Kuang's writing. I can see how this might work for others. To me, it didn't really, so I don't want to degrade it too much because there are the super fans out there for Kuang. It's not me. Apparently, this is my second of her fantasy novels I've tried to read, but if she writes another book like Yellowface, that was me. So I think I will try again if she writes something outside of fantasy, possibly, or again, maybe wait a little longer for more of the reviews and other maybe like the hardcore fantasy readers that are more used to sword and sorcery kind of fantasy novels, as opposed to an RF Kuang fantasy novel where it's heavy-handed messaging in this world parallel to ours, like she did in Babel and now in Katabasis. So who's this for is, unfortunately, yes, it's for other fans of RF Kuang. I think if you read and enjoyed the Poppy War or Babel, you will like this for sure, because it's kind of a continuation and improvement on her work in Babel. So if you like Babel, you're going to like Katabasis. If you didn't like Babel, like me, you probably won't like this. So it's the people that are like me that liked Yellowface, or kind of that in the middle that you want to give it a chance. It's sort of romantic-y, but sort of not. There's a romance subplot, but it's like saying, I saw this online, it's like saying Spider-Man is a romance. Like, yes, there's a romance subplot with Mary Jane and Peter Parker, but it's definitely not a romance movie or comic series Spider-Man. Similar here to Katabasis, there is a romance subplot woven throughout the narrative, but the main thing is the journey and the world building. And if you like academics, and I'm very familiar with the academic world, and maybe it's because I'm not familiar with the Ivy League, Cambridge, Oxford level of academics, that it's different. Like business school is maybe not as bad as this classical academic world. It doesn't seem that cutthroat in the PhD business world, but what do I know? My only perspective is the business side of academia. So maybe it's different in those classical studies. With that said, should you read it? If you like Babel, yes. If you didn't know, there is better uses of your time, I believe. And there's so many other books that I recently read that I loved and want to talk about. So 3.5, take that as you will. So thanks for watching this final review and talk and thoughts on RF Kuang's Katabasis. My thoughts on it. If you enjoyed this or enjoy things I like, be sure to check out the other videos on the channel. Thanks for watching and have a great day.